So before I start, you may notice there's a very significant difference between that lady with the 2 gold medals and me. So Dame Kelly Holmes is our Chief Wellbeing Ambassador at Personal Group this year. And you've probably seen in the news that she's had quite a journey herself over the last few days, and she decided not to come and stay in person for her own well-being, the theme of the conference. So really quite a good sort of thing of things really playing out in real life. So you've got me instead, and I have to say that I can't run as fast as Kelly. But I have got some thoughts on well-being and some of the things that we've been working on here at Personal Group over the last year with Kelly's involvement. So let's kick off. It's a really interesting session to run, I think, this coming into the event, seeing how many different strands of well-being that there are. It does sort of slightly make me think, are we reaching peak well-being? Before I was Chief Executive of Personal Group, I was a reward consultant, and before that I was an HR person. So I live on your side of the fence, I suppose, a lot of the time. But as a chief exec, I'm sort of conscious sometimes looking across at HR, we can get very involved in things and think they're a really, really good idea. I mean, how many of you remember let's scrap performance appraisals and go to twice annual check-ins, and why don't we get rid of benefits and call it clean cash? And when I first started in HR, which is going back about 100 years, it used to be called staff management, and then we were personnel, and then we were HR, and now we're people. So we can be quite a faddy bunch. And I suppose my challenge is well-being another fad, or is it here to stay? And I think the reason why I think it is here to stay is fundamentally that work is catching up with society. So for a very long time in our real lives, we've known that keeping a stiff upper lip is probably not the best way to live your life, that boys and men do cry, that trudging to work 9 to 5 in a cubicle is not the only way to deliver your job, whatever Jacob Rees-Mogg thinks, and that straight, white, middle-class men aren't the only ones who deserve promotion. So I think what's happening is we're seeing the workplace starting to much more reflect people's experiences in out of work, and we're seeing that merge into the opportunity for businesses to encourage their staff to be able to thrive at work and in life. It's a joint thing. You can't separate yourself. You can't say part of me is at work, a part of me is at home, and I'm different people. We are all the same people. So the whole thing about, being your own self, bringing yourself to work, being me, all of those things are really crucial, I think, in this world of well-being. But if you're going to really deliver something around gold standard, or double gold standard, as we talk about, it's really thinking about what can you do with well-being to create something that is a meaningful deliverable. And the danger is that you let well-being become a series of initiatives. So it's a fresh fruit day, it's giving people duvet days, it's a summer Friday. It's a series of things that don't really have a coherent thought. And I was just talking to Phil, the organiser of the conference, before I came up, and he was talking about there are a few companies who are doing this really, really well. And then there's a lot of businesses who are doing it very piecemeal. And as a chief exec, I sit on a board, we have investors. I can see it from the other side too. I know as a board that we are facing challenges around costs. So employment costs are going up. There's all the uncertainty around things like supply chains. Investors are getting twitchy. You've all seen the stock market fall quite a lot. And therefore there is an element that when someone from HR comes and says, in the face of all this, let's let people go home early on summer Fridays, that's a good idea, isn't it? There is sometimes a feeling that's really tone deaf. But the other half of me knows that that's because from an HR lens, you are seeing a much bigger picture. So you're seeing things that are magnified on social media, and that worries people, whether it's worry about not being able to see a GP, whether it's worry about cost of living, monkeypox, you name it. From an HR perspective, you can see how challenging people's lives are. And therefore, that's why I think the sort of main theme of my presentation is how can you create something that isn't seen as being adjacent to the purpose and the delivery of the business, but is fundamental to delivering high performance in your organisation. It's a challenge, I think, for HR teams to get a really coherent message across. And it's really important to think about what are the messages that you're tying into. So is it about the purpose of the business? Is it about the strategy of the business? Or is it something that you're doing on the side which doesn't quite seem to play in? So what we've been doing is looking at some real evidence-based performance links. So how can you think about delivering wellbeing in your organisation as a way of enhancing performance in the business. Sorry, I missed that slide out completely, but it's not very interesting. It was just what I said about the different pressures that you've got to face. So one of the things that I tend to read and listen and watch quite widely. And just as a slight diversion, one of the things that I've looked at, I don't know how many of you listen to the High Performance podcast, how many of you listen to Diary of a CEO, anybody? Hands? Yes, quite a few, excellent. So I think those two things are really, really interesting. I'll come on to talk about why I think they're interesting in the sort of performance and wellbeing space. There's also a couple of books there that I've read recently. The No Rules came out in 2020 in the pandemic and easily missed because we were obviously busy with other things. And essentially it talks about how Netflix have created the culture of, unlimited holiday, no policies, all of that stuff. I think it's a bit hyped, but I can also see that this very, very strong culture around very high trust of their employees is essential. So definitely worth a read. And then Matthew Syde's work. Matthew Syde is always worth a read. He's so interesting, so well researched. And he talks about rebel ideas and how real diversity in your organisation builds a strong organisation. And then Drive to Survive. I don't know if people have been watching Drive to Survive. Not interested in Formula One at all, but now I really enjoy it because of Drive to Survive. So what's the theme? You're looking at me thinking, well, okay, fair enough, you've come up with a few things. What's the theme behind all of these? And I think, as well as working with Kelly over the last few months, is that high performance doesn't necessarily mean the things that we think it does. So there is a fixed mindset in this country, I think, and certainly in the States, that high performance means really long hours, saying goodbye to family and friends, not looking after your physical or mental well-being, not sleeping enough, all of those things in order to deliver long hours. And you see that in legal firms, you see it in consultancies. And I suppose my challenge back is actually, if you listen to some of these things, if you listen to really high performance individuals or high performance businesses, they recognise that high performance is a cycle. There will be times in every business when you have to say to people, look, we're going to have to accelerate. And that does mean longer hours for a period. It means working hard. But there's also a season of recovery around that where your well-being is meaningful and comes back into play. And those are the things that I think is most interesting about that. If you look at the investable asset of humans, rock stars, actors, sports people, those individuals, their well-being, physical, mental, spiritual, whatever, is so looked after because we know that for people to perform at their best, they need to be in a place where they feel supported, they feel valued, and they can be who they are. And I think one of the things that I was also thinking about looking at Matthew's side is that if you think about an example like the England football team, so I know, let's just rub out the very recent results, or just ignore those, pretend those haven't happened, and look at the results of the Euros and the World Cup. Those results were the best in 50 years in terms of the team progressing through the competitions, the way they performed, the way they worked as a team, led by a guy called Gareth Southgate, who is a very interesting man, has obviously grown up in football, but also knows that football isn't necessarily the best place to find understanding about what makes teams work, how to drive high performance. So he created a group of other thinkers, including Matthew Syed, but also thinkers from the military, David Balesford from cycling, from other sports, to really look at what does high performance mean. And that focus on well-being and performance is absolutely intrinsically linked. If you listen to the High Performance podcast, there's one last summer that he did about that, and it is really interesting. So thinking about linking well-being and performance is really crucial. And it feels to me as though if you've got an organisation where these guys just kick a ball around. I know it's high pressure, but literally they just kick a ball around. If you've got doctors in your organisation, or pilots, or people who need precision, or very detailed things, or empathy, you're working with people in a care home in dementia, surely their well-being is even more important to the organisation, and that's something that you should place at the heart of your strategy around it. So Kelly's done a video for us, and I don't know if any of you have watched the documentary that she made. It went out on Sunday night, called Being Me, and it is really good. It's available on ITV Hub. It's very moving. But some of the things that she's really talked about, I think, in this little short clip we're going to come on to, do really talk to the importance of creating that environment where people can do of their best and deliver what they want to. So I'll let Kelly speak.
For me, my story was starting school, and actually sport was the only thing I was good at. So that gave me a sense of, okay, there's something to focus on. And I think it's important that when you feel like you've got a talent, that you take that talent as far as you can. So high performance is doing better than expected. So sometimes we can always push ourselves to do a good job. But actually, I think first and foremost, you need to want to do a really good job. And as a business and organisation, of course, they want everybody to be the best version of themselves. Around that, though, is a supportive mechanism that you need. So mentors, people who have gone before you, people who you can see a pathway to success. When it comes to your individual role, so for example, in an athletics team, I'm the person who has to run around a track. I might have a physio or a massotherapist, because without having that other support, I'm not going to stay fit and healthy and in good shape. I'm going to be injured. I was injured a lot, but I had a team around me that helped me get over those injuries. The well-being side of pushing yourself is really important, because of course you want a happy workforce. You want to go into your job enjoying what you do, essentially. Some days you're going to have off days, some days you're going to be really on it and I'm going for gold in your attitude. Those both need to be nurtured. You need to have people around you that push you to get the best out of you and to get the results. And a lot of people perform under pressure because there's no other way of delivering. So I think that is one thing I have noticed with some organisations, is that they move the milestones a little bit. They get a little bit scared and think, let's leave it another week. Put people under pressure, because you'll see the people that will rise up to the occasion. Do you know your workforce? Do you know what other barriers they have? Have you got policies in place that allow them to feel protected and supported? The focus comes when you really want to do something well, you have to be in the zone. We call it in the zone in athletics. People might have seen my face with my eyes literally staring, because there is some times in life that you can't let distractions get in your way. You can't let that last minute of a delivery, suddenly somebody says something and then it all just goes. The two parallels that I've seen very different in business at a higher level is that as an athlete, there's a date in the diary. It doesn't move. If I'm ill, not quite ready, they're not going to say, oh, I'll hold the Olympics for you and I'll hold that race for you till you feel a bit better and ready to go. The more you push people, you get to a breaking point, and people then don't perform at their best because they have other things that are going on in their lives or other pressures that don't allow them to focus on the job that they're meant to do. And if somebody understands that firstly your workforce are humans that need a bit of nurturing sometimes, then you'll get a better person coming to work.
That's great, that's from Kelly. So I think what's really interesting about what Kelly's talking to us about is that there is this cycle of you have to deliver. We all have periods in our jobs where we have to deliver, but you also need to be aware of well-being, of the support that you can give your employees in order for them to be able to perform at their best, because we can't all have our foot flat on the accelerator all the time. It doesn't work like that. So in terms of the next slide, you're going to do, I think, if everyone's got the app at the ready, so you should have an app that you've downloaded on your phone now called Reba Employee Benefits, and it's a sort of lovely purple and orangey colour. If you tap that and go into agenda and go into this presentation, which is, I'm trying to find where it is, we're at 11 o'clock, aren't we? So if you look for one at 11 o'clock, you'll find somewhere called A New Era of Work to a New Era of Wellbeing. If you click on that, it will take you into a poll, hopefully. Go into Ask Questions and then go to Polls. Okay, you all managed to get to that point? Okay. So you need to find the event, go to Ask Questions, and then when you go into there you can find Q&A on the one side, and if you press the button that says Polls, it will then bring up a poll for you. And these are the questions that are asked on there. So it's a sort of continuum, really, from we don't have a wellbeing strategy, we have some disparate benefits, we have some integration between pillars, or we have a clearly defined wellbeing strategy. And what is really interesting about this is that Justine Wolfe, who was speaking last year from Inecto, asked exactly these same questions. And I can see, we can all see on our phones, can't we, where the scores are coming from. The majority of people are saying that there is some integration between the pillars. Last year, I think that was still the case, but what has leaped this year is we have a clearly defined benefit strategy. We have a clearly defined wellbeing strategy. I think last year there were only 3 or 4 companies who said, yeah, we have a clearly defined wellbeing strategy, and we've got now in the region of, sort of 17 businesses with a number who've got integration between the pillars. So companies are clearly making progress in this important area, which is great because it does support your organisation, and certainly some of the things that we've talked around evidence-based to support that. In the real world, and obviously Timpson's, they heal shoes, they cut keys, it's a very real world sort of job. James Timpson, who's the chief exec now of Timpson's, he just takes a very, very open approach to this that says if you trust people, if you look after them, they will do a good job. If you fundamentally treat people like humans, like Kelly was saying, then you will find that people do a good job. And he's really open. He did a column in the Sunday Times over last summer and the sort of autumn, which is well worth getting hold of if you've got a Times subscription. And he talks about how they treat people, and he talks also about the way that they make sure that obviously there are inevitably going to be some failures. I mean, you might know that they have a big ex-prisoner recruitment campaign. There are always going to be failures, but at the same time, the vast majority of their staff really, really feel supported and do a good job. And sometimes it's looking at these real-world examples and saying, how can we build these into our businesses? And with technology available now, what you really find is that you can customise whatever you want, and I'll come on to talk about that in a moment. But it's important that you think about, when you're developing your strategy, how can we build a benchmark that evidences practice, not intent? So going back to the comment that I was making as chief exec, one of the challenges for the board is always, how do we make this really work for us as a business, as well as a place that we want people to be happy to work for? So the plan that I'm going to suggest that you think about is actually pretty simple. 3 points, really. First of all, you need to ask your leadership team. Now, I'm all for ambition. I'm all for ambition in terms of setting out where you want to be. So this is a continuum from very light touch through to meaningful, through to the way we work, the way we are. And on the left-hand side, you can see there will be companies who say, we want people to come to work, and we'll provide a few benefits, but fundamentally, it's their job to be here and work. In the middle, you might talk about it being more meaningful, so you openly talk about having a culture of putting well-being first, and you want people to thrive in work and in life. And obviously underneath is sort of, you've got to put your money where your mouth is on these things. And then the right-hand side is perhaps going out to the outliers who are trialling things like the 4-day week for 5 days pay, those sorts of things. And it's a very, very high trust and high performance culture. Now, the thing that I would say is if you haven't got your leadership team on board, do not promise that you're going into that top right, this left-hand box, the right-hand box. Because if you start doing wellness washing, like greenwashing, you're pretending that you're doing stuff, you will lose trust. You will lose whatever trust you have with your employees straight away. So better to start in a modest way and then build from that over time. There is a real line between being ambitious about what you want set out and also damaging trust in the organisation. And then taking the idea from the Matthew Side book that I mentioned earlier, co-creating your strategy is essential. If you look around your leadership team or you look around your HR team, you will typically find people that are quite similar to each other. You might find people of an age, of a background, they might all be the same ethnicity, they might be all the same gender, they might be all the same sexuality. Actually, going out and talking to your employees about what they want will help you build a much better and more meaningful strategy, and it's insight-based. So again, when the board are saying, why are you doing this? You can point to, well, this is what our competitors are doing, and in order for us to hire people, we need to do it. But there's also something about creating something that is entirely yours, that is something that has your fingerprints all over it, that is a unique employee value proposition that allows you to do things, in a really special way. And curating a strategy is essential. There's a lot of Me Too going on. I don't mean Me Too. I mean, like copying going on in this space. And it feels to me as though we're in danger of getting into that too much. So really think about your strategy. You can use lots of different ways of doing it. Obviously, we have a benefits platform, but it's thinking about building that strategy in a curated way that is meaningful for you and then developing it. Communicate, listen to your employees, and then develop it further. So 3 takeaways would be: link your wellbeing to performance and help your board understand how important that is. Don't overpromise on what you can deliver, build over time, and finally co-create what you want and make sure that your strategy around wellbeing is curated just for you. And I've got a flashing red light, so I'm out of time. Thank you.